Welcome, everyone, to the Individual and Creative Business Review Panel, Day 1. I'm Jesus Pantel with the Cultural Arts Division. I'm the Cultural Funding Supervisor in the Cultural Arts Division in the Economic Development Department. We are recording this review panel today. We're also doing 2 review panels today, so if you are here watching live currently, this is for individuals and creative businesses. The Thrive Elevate for nonprofits is happening concurrently, but is in a different Zoom link. So if you are here to have your nonprofit application scored and reviewed, that is in a different panel. So just wanted to make sure those of you who are in attendance here are aware of that. And so the review panelists today have reviewed and scored all of the applications tentatively prior to today. They will be discussing the applications to go over their final scores. We also have an outside equity facilitator, Jen Margulies, who will be assisting us today. So she will ensure that both myself as well as the review panelists are keeping equity in mind as we are reviewing these applications. So again, the panelists have tentatively made comments and scored all of them. They can change their scores, but are not required to, depending on how the discussion today goes. We will have 10 minutes max review time per application. We will be timing it. We will stop the recording and the timer if there are any tech issues, somebody's internet goes out, something to that effect. We have asked the panelists not to repeat what has already been stated if comments have been said. If they have a different take, we ask that they do that. And if they agree with what has been said, we still want them to mention that as well. So that way you as the applicant and also their fellow panelists get an idea of how they are thinking of the application. We've advised the panelists not to score on consensus, so they can have different takes. They're not trying to convince each other that, to come to a certain score. We have asked the panelists to provide overall application comments, as well as comments for some of the specific review criteria. If they're, if it's a high scoring, then there may not necessarily be comments, but if there are comments, specific review criteria, the panelists will talk about that. We have asked that the panelists align their comments with the review criteria, and that they look beyond grantsmanship to the extent possible. So if some of the information is hard to find, they may note that. But if it is there and it meets the review criteria, then they will score accordingly. We have also advised them that firsthand experience or looking at your website is okay, but it's not required. So only if they have specific knowledge of your work, not their friend or someone that they know. They need to have the specific experience. There are no conflicts of interest with any of our panelists today. And then we will be getting started in just a second. So let me get my timer ready. And all right. And the first application up for review is Atlas Major. Anita and Aaron are our primary and secondary, and the timer will start whenever Anita is ready to begin.
Hi, good morning. I'm Anita Lakshman. Welcome. I just wanted to thank Atlas for their application. You all are doing some really valuable work, and I really appreciate you guys showcasing Pakistani and Indian music to the Austin community. I reviewed your application, and you guys are doing really great things. One, primary feedback that I have is that I'm not seeing exactly how you are uplifting their voices to the larger Austin community in an authentic way, so that the Austin community understands the value that the South Asian groups are really adding to our city. They definitely are underrepresented groups and are extraordinarily diverse. Besides, bringing music to Austin, I would have loved to see a little bit more information about, the intersectionality that these groups have, that your organization has. So talking a little bit more about, gender, and, all the different cultures within actually the South Asian community. And sort of, telling us a little bit more about how you would support and uplift those voices in a more in-depth manner. So that is some feedback that I have.
Thank you. Secondary, Aaron?
Yes, good morning. Thank you again, Atlas, for your application. Many of my comments echo what was just shared by Anita. I appreciate the work. I appreciate the outline of everything you've shared, but I did find it difficult to align the deeper impact across these organizations as opposed to sometimes what was described as a single artist. So I would have liked to have seen more of that as well. The application itself was a little confusing and required bouncing back and forth between questions to uncover specific answers to the required elements. One of those elements, separate comment, one of the elements that was not addressed was accessibility services in this application. So that was difficult to score.
Thank you, Anita and Aaron, for your perspectives. I do, before I open this up for further discussion, just want to let folks know, both the public and, again, for our reviewers, that when something is difficult and reviewers are having to kind of bounce back and forth between categories or questions to find answers, those answers are given points. Like that isn't taken into consideration in the score necessarily, but our reviewers have said that they want to provide that feedback to you all, to applicants, so that you all know in doing these kinds of things in the future, that it's helpful to keep your answers to the question where they're proposed, so that reviewers don't have to do as much bouncing back and forth. Because, as Jesus said, this particular program, we're really mindful about grantsmanship not being part of what you all are going to be scored on. That's not going to affect your scores, but it is something to keep in mind for the future. So Aaron, thank you for bringing that up. And then I know we don't all have to agree, the panelists don't all have to agree in what you saw when you reviewed. So I do want to invite other panelists here to mention any other perspectives that you might have on the Atlas Major application.
This was actually, it's not necessarily a different perspective. I just wanted to clarify something. Is it Atlas Major? Because I'm seeing MAIOR. I don't know if that's pronounced the same way. It's just one thing I want to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm seeing different things at different places. So appreciate that.
And if the application does score high enough to receive funding, then when we enter into the contract agreement with them, we will make sure that the name is correct. If there is a typo, if it's spelled with a J in one place or an I in a different place. Shannon?
I wanted to say that I also had challenges finding the answers throughout the application. Sorry to repeat, but I wanted to say that I put this on hold and came back to it and actually found more answers as I reread it, and do feel like they're addressing intersectionality and multiple different groups. So I might have scored it a little bit higher than my colleagues here, just because I felt like they were doing more than what Anita and Aaron have said.
Thank you. Anyone else have something to add about your review? All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. If you would please finalize your scores and then let me know when you have done so just by raising your hand, and then we'll move on to the next application. Shannon, Hayato, Aaron, Anita. and Liz. All right. So let me stop our timer. And I would have stopped it once the review was done. Our next application up for review is the mall. Liz and Anita are our primary and secondary. And Liz, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Liz Unazi, and it is a pleasure to be a reviewer with you today. I do want to say this was a very strong application, in my opinion. So my feedback is going to be more on the small nitpicky side, but overall, well written. I scored mid to high in a lot of the categories for this application because of the metrics that were presented. I did appreciate percentages, the direction, like the breakdown of all of the different constituents that you would include, and the larger audiences that may benefit from this opportunity. The only thing that I would say was kind of I guess and it's minor, but exactly the self-defense aspect of it. So are all of the 6 sessions going to be on like self-defense, or are they going to be something else, and how is it going to connect to it being virtual? I was kind of confused about that part, because if I look down here in the accessibility section, it said that part of that would be a virtual opportunity. So I wasn't sure, is it more informational? Is it in person? How that was all connected. But overall, I did enjoy the application, and it does look like it will meet a large amount of people, which is what we want this grant to do.
Thank you. Secondary, Anita?
I echo a lot of my colleagues' comments. Overall, I gave this quite a high score. I really appreciated the specificity in this application. Agree that I really like the specific data about, who makes up your organization, who comes to your programs, what type of programs you hold, and exactly why. One thing I want to mention is that it seems like the groups that you are trying to uplift, women, queer, and artists of color folks, are in a dangerous part of our society and require being lifted up. And the example that you gave for the self-defense, I think, is extraordinary personally, and I find it to be really valuable, empowering, and fills a gap where we need to keep people safe. And so overall, I scored this as a very high application, and I appreciate the work that you're doing.
And before we open it up to comments from other panelists, for virtual events, I know Liz was giving feedback for both for future improvement. Overall, the application was high, but it is fine to have virtual events, so the panel is aware for eligibility concern. Whether it can be more clear, that's a different question, but just in and of itself, having virtual events is fine. With that being said, comments from other panelists?
I would like to say I appreciate what this group is doing. All of my scoring across their activities, intersectionality, and their activities were fantastic. However, the budget and the ADA compliancy was not as well aligned in the application as in others. So that was the only few sections where I felt there was some criticism on my part.
Thank you, Erin. And just for those watching, when people talk about comparing, they're comparing within their reviewers or comparing within their application. So, someone might say, I might not have scored this as high as I scored another section. People were not asked to compare one applicant to another. So it's all your application with respect to the review criteria. Anybody else, perspectives you'd like to share about your review? And we did ask panelists not to repeat one another, so don't be concerned if there is a silence in this space. It might just mean that folks agree with what's been said and don't have a whole lot more to add. All right, thank you.
If there are no further comments, panelists are in general agreement with what has been said by the primary and secondary. If you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Shannon, Liz, Hayato, Anita. And Aaron. All right. Next application up for review is Kick the Bucket Podcast. Hayato and Liz are our primary and secondary. And Hayato, whenever you're ready to begin.
Sure. Okay. My name is Hayato. So the Kick the Bucket podcast is a project that aims to serve to tell and serve older adults. This will naturally go into a lot of intersectionalities when it comes to people of color and disabilities. Overall, I said the project is seeking to uplift marginalized communities that are generally underserved, but it didn't quite prove how much it was going to seek out and reach the communities within the elder care communities that I was discussing. It mentioned several times of giving inclusivity to BIPOC, LGBTQ, and disabilities, but was kind of hard to tell in what ways it specifically be uplifting and empowering these people outside of the umbrella of sharing their stories as the target demographic. But otherwise, I think the score, the grant application was pretty clear in what it wants to accomplish and how, and it was very inclusive in its mission.
Thank you. Secondary, Liz?
Yes. So I actually scored this very high because of the incredible detail that went into the application. One thing that I really appreciated was the assisted listening devices, the reserved seating, making sure that the transcripts were in large print. I thought that was very intentional, especially for the demographic that we're serving. And I love the bios that were included to show who is driving the force behind this particular movement that you all are building, and all of the various intersectionalities that are seen in the application. So I don't have any notes, but I did want to say that I did appreciate the detail that was put into this application, and it gave a very clear picture of what the podcast was about.
All right, thank you both. Any perspectives that other reviewers would like to share?
Seeing as there are none, if there are no comments the panelists have that are different from what has already been stated, if you would please then finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Hayato, Aaron, Shannon, Anita, and Liz. All right. Next application up for review is Sanctuary Homes. Shannon and Hayato are our primary and secondary. And Shannon, whenever you're ready to begin.
Hi, I'm Shannon Kors. I really appreciated this application. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes, so I'm looking down. I gave it a fairly high score. While it seems like it's been, sorry, I'm all over the place. Started in 2023, but previously had a history of supporting BIPOC communities. They partner with a lot of community partners and groups that are focused in that area as well. They have a very strong and diverse advisory board. I love that they're supporting creatives. Their events with the book club and the open garden and the moonscape are interesting and very focused on the communities that we're focused on. Let's see. minority, and they partner with minority and women-owned businesses, accessibilities. Some events had trained professionals. One, and I think it was the Moonscapes, wasn't mentioned. And language, there was no accommodations for 2 of the events. So didn't score as highly on those 2, but for the most part, it's a very well thought out application.
Thank you. Secondary, Hathel?
Yeah, pretty much agree with most of those things. I appreciate the focus of the group to find and serve the constituency through the organizations they partner with. I think gives a lot of effort on who they want to include, not just generally putting the program out there, but also bringing them in. So that's my only addition.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other perspectives reviewers would like to share? Anything you saw differently? Anything that hasn't been mentioned that you think it's important to mention in the public conversation?
If there are no new comments or different perspectives from what has already been stated, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Aaron, Hayato, Shannon, Anita, and Liz. All right. Next application up for review is The City We Built, Black Leaders of Austin. Aaron and Shannon are our primary and secondary. And Aaron, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you for the opportunity to review this application. The primary activities in this application are surrounding the launch and publication of a book, of which the application is the title. I did find this application difficult to score. It took quite a bit of uncovering to find the various answers as we were expected to just score. So I wanted to first say that. As well, I didn't understand some sections such as how they were operationalizing equity work. Overall, this application, the work sounds interesting. The fact that it's a literary project is interesting, but there are just some sections within this application that are overall confusing or lacking.
Thank you.
I actually gave this, sorry,
Go ahead.
jumped in. I actually gave this application a very high score. I felt like it covered all of the, or most of the needs of what we're looking for. It was very thorough. It represents the diverse Black experience, the discussions and conversations around the Black experience, thorough accessibility and language. I felt the history was there. I appreciated this application.
Thank you. And as a reminder, we are not scoring by consensus, so it is fine if panelists have different perspectives. They can change their scores depending on the feedback from other panelists, but are not required to do so. And so with that being said, I'll open it up if there are comments from other panelists. And I would appreciate if you do, we have had somewhat divergent views on this, so if other panelists can let us know how they're thinking of this application. Liz, go ahead.
I also scored this application fairly high. I thought it was very detailed, and I think what stood out the most was that this is a field that is very hard to fund. It's very hard to find funding outside of self-propelled financing. And so the intentionality behind the application and the why behind it was very important for me to understand in order to score it this way. And so I think that they did a good job of covering all of those bases in that way, because it is something that it can be challenging to fund in other areas.
My input on this is mostly echoing Liz. But I have my take on this project is that it is one to preserve and share history of institutionally marginalized and risk of displacement communities. And I think in the way it fulfills that mission shows that it is dedicated to the mission, not the like selling of a book or producing or promoting the artist in a way. So I found that this was very community-based project.
I'll also add, because there's some disparity in scores, that I rated this application really high for some of the positive reasons just mentioned, but I found the application and their work to be really authentic, to really, doing really deep work to uplift voices. So I also rated this application high.
Thank you all. And I just want to come in and remind folks that we have asked reviewers to make sure that they are scoring on the content of the application. And although we might give you constructive criticism about, how to write these kinds of applications in the future, that folks have been asked to not score on the technicalities of whether things are easy or difficult to find in an application. Any other comments before we close out on this one? All right, thanks y'all.
Alrighty, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Liz, Hayato, Anita, Shannon, and Aaron. All right. Next application up for review is Unhoused Voices, Stories from the Street. Anita and Aaron are our primary and secondary. And Anita, whenever you're ready to begin. Oh, and you're muted, so the timing will start when you're unmuted and giving your comments.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Thank you for this application. I found it really interesting. I love the idea of representation of the unhoused. I will admit that the idea of verbatim theaters, it was new to me. So I think I probably would have appreciated just a definition of what that is. I did look it up, of course. That said, I had some issues with the application. One thing that stuck out to me is that I feel like the folks who want to put on this project don't have a real deep history in Austin. They've done some work in other cities in Tennessee and cities outside of Austin in Texas, but I don't feel like there's a real depth of understanding of the unhoused community in Austin. So that felt difficult for me to wrap my head around how they would do this project in a really authentic way that's impactful. The other thing I noticed is that I felt like the community engagement activities, there wasn't enough specificity about exactly what that would look like, how they would get folks to come here. There is a little bit of mention of like key constituencies. So I felt like that was a good opportunity for them to talk about specific, for example, LGBTQIA groups who are in Austin that they could partner with. And so that whole idea of like partnerships and community engagement felt really glossed over to me. And so I did not rate this application with a high score.
Thank you. Secondary, Aaron?
I did rate this with the high score. I found it easy to follow along. Great storytelling in the purpose of this group and what they're trying to develop for the communities. Small little notes in regards to constituency and how they're impacted by this production. But overall, I didn't share some of the same concerns Anita had. So I really appreciate that we have the primary and secondary reviewers. I liked this application and it fulfills a niche as compared to the rest of the applications I scored. Thank you.
Thank you. And as a reminder, we're not scoring on consensus, so it is okay if panelists have different perspectives. You can change your score depending on feedback from other panelists, but you are not required to do so. While panelists may make reference to other applications, they are scoring each application individually, not comparing it to other applications, but just how this particular application addresses the review criteria. Again, since we do have divergent scores, somewhat divergent scores, if other panelists can chime in to let us know how they view the application. Hayato?
So I think I kind of have a mix of the primary and secondary here. I felt that reaching a community of displaced people is a incredible way to try to start correcting what has already happened of people who face displacement. But like Anita said, the leadership doesn't show a strong history or roots in the community they're helping. And while the mission is noble and scores high in many other places, it still leaves a lot of doubt of how effective will this outreach be to the community it's trying to serve versus how much of it is just the show and this is the theme or the topic. So that part, it got kind of a mixed score from me.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, Shannon.
I agree, actually, with Hayato. Hayato, sorry, I might have said your name wrong. Yeah, that I give it a mid to low high review for the very same reasons, not to repeat what exactly you said very eloquently.
Thank you.
I agree with Shannon and Hayato. I scored midways as well because it is a very the impact could be great. I think we just need clarity on the history and buy-in in the community, as well as the founders or the constituents stake in it, I guess.
Thank you all. Anything else that folks want to make sure that we get mentioned here?
So it sounds like we are kind of all over the place on this application. So as Jen was just asking, any other comments that you want to make, anything that hasn't been covered already that you want to make sure the applicant and your fellow panelists are aware of? If there are no further comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Liz, Aaron, Shannon, Hayato, and Anita. All right. And we are scheduled for a break. We are about 30 minutes ahead of schedule, which is fine. This is a estimate of how far along we're going to go. Let's go ahead and take, we have a 15-minute break scheduled. Let's break for 20 minutes. I have 10:34, so 21 minutes. Let's come back at 5 till 11. We do have the schedule published on our website for morning and breaks. So if there are any people that are watching in the public or are planning and wanting to watch live, we'll be back at 5 till 11. We will pause the recording while we are on break. And then, all right, and we are back from break. We are reviewing individual and creative businesses. This is panel 1, day 1. Our next application up for review is Spaces. Liz and Anita are our primary and secondary, and the 10-minute time limit will start when Liz starts giving her commentary.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Genazi. I'm excited to be here. I do want to make sure, I'm sorry if you can hear the rain, but I did want to let you know that I was very excited to read this grant. I did score it on the higher side because it does seem to be that it was for and by, as Jen mentioned earlier. I do believe I didn't have any feedback really. I love the intentionality behind the proposed activities. Itemized 1 through 8. I thought that was very helpful when doing the scoring, as well as the breakdown of the budget. It was very clear on where the payments are going to the artist and to the work. So I did score this fairly high, so I don't have any other feedback.
Thank you. Secondary, Anita?
I pretty much echo Liz's comments. I was pretty excited by this application. I felt like it certainly is filling a niche, very specific about reconnecting and honoring the Black community in East Austin, by a couple that is rooted in the community and has a history in the community. And I thought that, their Celebrate Black America in Austin event is great. So yeah, I don't have any other feedback. I rated this pretty highly. I thought the application was really strong.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Other reviewers, anything that you'd like to add in, share about your perspective on this application?
I agree with both of them.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing some head nods. All right. And I'll mention again for folks who weren't on the earlier part of the morning session, we have asked the reviewers not to repeat comments that the other people have already made, just in the interest of time. So don't worry if there's some silence after that question. It just means that people are in agreement.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Jen. So yes, thank you for that reminder, especially for those who didn't hear that this morning. So if there are no additional comments or comments that haven't been stated already, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Liz, Aaron, Shannon, Shannon, Hayato, and Anita. Okay, we are all good. All right, so our next application up for review is Central Austin Voices, our vital community. Hayato and Liz are our primary and secondary, and Hayato, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, so Central Austin Voices is basically a project that wants to create a lot of AR installations within a few targeted neighborhoods of Crestview, Brentwood, and Allendale. The project overall seems like one that is dedicated to preserving history, and within the application it showed expanding accessibility to these installations. But aside from being the content of it when it happens to be local history made by people within institutionalized communities, it was hard to see how much of this project was trying to specifically reach and uplifted these marginalized communities. It looked a project that seemed more to create these installations and have them available to anyone who can come and enjoy it. But yeah, I'm just kind of repeating myself. The target demographic didn't seem to particularly uplift communities facing institutional marginalization. So I gave it kind of a medium to medium high score. It included a lot of accessibility and was considering how this installation would be viewed by people. But again, it just seems more of a general project.
Thank you. Liz?
Yes, I actually agree with Hayato. I scored this mid, in the mid to lower range, because though it is a very intriguing and engaging opportunity, I do think there were some gaps in how we connect the people that this is actually serving, as well as those that are presenting the opportunity. Some of it, I think the biggest thing is like the cultural leadership part. That was one of the elements that I thought impacted my score the most. But again, I agree with Hayato.
Thank you both. Other reviewers' perspectives you'd like to add? I see folks looking at their screens, looking through their comments to see if there's anything to add in. Thanks for doing that.
So it looks, at least with your preliminary scores and comments, that the scores are kind of all over the place on this application, which is fine. We have, again, we're not going necessarily for consensus here, but are there other comments, either things that you liked or things that you would have liked to have seen in this application that have not been mentioned by other panelists?
I have a note in regards to, at least in one section, providing only the minimum answer necessary. And I put the example of cultural leadership. It discussed only one person. Otherwise, I scored this fairly strongly.
Thank you. Anybody else?
If there are no further comments, especially ones that have not already been stated that you would like the applicant or your fellow panelists to know, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Liz, Anita, Hayato, Aaron, and Shannon. Okay, everybody, right at the same time. All right. Next application up for review is Host Publications. Shannon and Hayato are our primary and secondary. And Shannon, whenever you're ready to begin.
Taking a second to pull it up, sorry. Yes, this was, I graded this application fairly high, about mid-high. Host Publications originally was founded to highlight international writers, but has pivoted to now include marginalized communities. So I thought that was really great. They reformed or refocused their efforts to that community, those communities. Their leadership is very diverse and has lived experiences. Their events for book publishing and launch and their ice cream socials was very well documented and thought out. The intersectionality was well documented. I did make a note that while bilingual works is an essential pillar for their program, they didn't mention language translations for marketing efforts. So I might have put that at a lower score because of that, but it seems like a great group who's doing wonderful work in the publishing world to highlight marginalized communities.
Thank you, Hayato.
Yeah, I think I had mostly similar comments. The project overall seems to kind of go between, or seems to focus on uplifting and empowering generally institutionalized, generally marginalized communities. And it seems like the focus of the group is that they would like to also and especially help those communities most in need. But it's not quite, it's hard to see exactly how built into the organization it is to make sure that they are reaching the people that they want to, instead of broadly collecting and broadly uplifting. But still, I gave this a fairly high score. I think I actually gave it a high score on the marketing as well, because they reached out to the ASL community, which English is not their first language. And so in that community, they have made efforts to reach that community that otherwise would not have been marketed to this show.
Thank you both. Other perspectives things that influenced your scores that you wanted to share from other reviewers? And those are two categories of things that influence your scores or other things that you would like to share.
While people are deciding if there are anything else, just echoing what Hayato said about ASL being a non-English language. I guess this is more for the applicants and for the panelists, because in the panelist training, we do advise our panelists of that. So, so just a reminder of that, if it has any bearing on how you're scoring. If there are no further comments that haven't been previously stated, any different perspectives on this application? If not, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Anita, Aaron, Liz, Shannon, and Hathel. All right. Next application up for review is La Navidad Sueña a Hogar. Aaron and Shannon are our primary and secondary. And Aaron, whenever you are ready to begin.
This is a great application. It is based upon a larger Christmas concert event and drawing audiences to what is described. Let me find the exact description here. Well, it's an event intended to promote and preserve Hispanic culture in Austin. So overall, it was a strong application. It was one of the strongest applications in regards to their ADA compliancy and reaching audiences that normally would not hear what would be a live music event. I enjoyed the application.
I agree with Aaron. This was a very strong application, focusing on Hispanic culture in particular for their Christmas concert. The budget was over the allotment of $30,000 was really my only note, but otherwise very strong application.
Thank you. And just a couple of clarifications before we open it up to other panelists. When talking about applications, even if a comparison is stated or made against another, the panelists are not comparing applications against each other. They are scoring them based on how each particular application meets a review criteria. And then as far as the budget is concerned, if they do score high enough to receive funding, then we will work with the applicant prior to entering into the grant paperwork to make sure that everything is correct, especially as they may not necessarily receive the full amount that they requested. It may be a smaller amount, but regardless, we will work with them. So just making sure that panelists are aware of that. With that being said, comments from other panelists? So relatively high scores and comments, it sounds like, for this one. Any divergent comments or thoughts on this application? If not, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Aaron, okay, everybody has finalized their scores. Thank you. All right, next application up for review is Lyra Rain. Anita and Aaron are our primary and secondary. And Anita, whenever you're ready to begin.
I really enjoyed reading this application about this filmmaker, and I thought overall it was a pretty strong application. I rated it pretty high. The reason being is I thought the subjects of their activities is really interesting, something that I haven't really seen before, very specific to Gen Z and, the digital age of, their relationships. The filmmaker, the leadership all seem to be in a category that we're really interested in representing. And so LGBTQTs specifically named, BIPOC. So I really liked that. I guess my concern, or, one area that could have been stronger is to really name specific partnerships that they had. So they said that they were, working with other groups, and they did really amazing things like equal pay for staff and all that, which was fantastic. I would have liked to know like who they worked with to kind of implement those things. And so that was my feedback, is that specific names of community groups would have been, make this application even stronger. But overall, I really enjoyed it. And I think that they would do a great job implementing their activity.
Thank you. Secondary, Aaron?
It sounds like Anita and I are in alignment on this one. Great application. The only sections where I found a little difficult was in regards to reaching tourists, was a little bit light. And then with all of these great ideas and the audiences they want to reach, it seems like the marketing line item in the budget was too small to achieve everything they were seeking to do.
Right. Thank you both. And I noticed that we do have some divergence in the initial scoring on this. So I would especially invite folks to share your perspectives on this application.
I think I mostly echo, but I scored this fairly high. I saw it as a art project that would be by and for communities of people of color. And I think the artists have shown both in their work experience and their personal background that they have like lived in these experiences that they are trying to help correct.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Shannon, I think you were raising your hand.
Yeah, I was just trying to get back to where I might have differed a little bit. I gave it a middle high rating. I am trying to find my notes on why the activity itself seemed a little vague to me. Even though it says it's hosting a screening and that, but maybe it didn't focus enough on the screenings being part of, it says Gen Z voices within the realm of social relationships, but I think I had an issue with it not being more focused on the groups that were marginalized, or marginalized groups. The other piece that I might have differed on with my colleagues here is the cultural leadership. I said it's unclear about the individual stakeholders' lived experiences, cultural understandings, but applicant specifies 50% belongs to underrepresented communities. I get that. I just didn't, I guess it wasn't enough lived experience explanation for me.
Thank you.
But it's a great application, point being.
Thanks. Yeah, Liz.
I agree with Shannon as well. I think it was more of the leadership and the lived experience that kind of was the biggest factor for me. But it is a very strong application. I can say that. But I do the leadership, I think, was probably the biggest thing.
Thank you so much. I do want to add just one reminder from both for this application and then kind of moving forward for folks who are watching, that when panelists or reviewers are looking at things like budget for marketing or for anything else, we have discussed that it is true that communities of color and other underrepresented communities and historically marginalized communities often do a lot with a little. So we've had that conversation about, not making assumptions about what can be accomplished with a small number of staff or with a small line item, knowing that people are able to, often accomplish quite a bit. What reviewers are looking for in the application is some kind of evidence that For this particular project, it makes sense that you can accomplish something based on what you've said. So we might not have a lot of money in a certain line item, but we know that we have access to, you know, this many mailing lists or, you know, these communities, you know, to do our outreach, for example. Just a clarification for applicants about what it means when you hear reviewers mentioning those mismatches that they might perceive.
Thank you for that, Jen. I was going to mention something somewhat related in that since our funding is from the hotel occupancy tax, there does have to be the public component. And so we do see that for this particular application. We also ask the panelists to give constructive criticism and feedback for future improvement. So, but with that being said, for the panelists, you know, it is a public activity, so it is open to tourists. We also require all of our grantees, if they receive funding, they are required to post to visitaustin.com, which is a website through the Austin Convention and Visitors Bureau. So specifically for tourists to come and see their applications. So, you know, criticism or, you know, constructive criticism, feedback on the application is welcomed. But everything is in compliance from, you know, what we can tell. And if this application is scored high enough to receive funding, we will make sure that everything is in compliance before we enter into the grant paperwork with the applicant. With that being said, any other comments that have not been stated? Anita, yes.
Yeah, I just want to add that when things seem a little bit vague in the application, I really look to the letters of recommendation. So this application did fill in some gaps for me. So I thought that, you know, one letter of recommendation in particular did highlight her this filmmaker's commitment to LGBTQ and BIPOC, you know, subject matter, and that she has experience rooted in that subject matter in the Austin community. So I just wanted to add that to the feedback for this applicant.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Other comments from the panel? We have a little over 2 minutes left for reviewing this application. If there are no additional comments that have not already been covered, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Erin, Hayato, Liz, Anita, and Shannon. All right. And our next application up for review is Leela, an Indian community theater. Liz and Anita are our primary and secondary. And Liz, whenever you are ready to begin.
Thank you. I was very excited about this application because I love the piece where it was shared that historically the opportunity to participate in the arts over business in a lot of ways was a challenge for this demographic. And so I really appreciate the intentionality from 2011 until now into putting that into practice. Clearly I'm a fan. I also appreciated the sharing of the leaders that were a part of this. I scored it very, very high overall. I think the only thing that I had a note about, which, hang on, I'm pulling up my notes now, was the actually, I think I didn't have any feedback notes, but overall, very high, very strong application. I love the overall mission, the clarity in it. And so, yeah, that's my feedback.
Great, thank you. Secondary? Which is Anita?
Yeah. I agree with my colleague. I rated this pretty highly. I do love the idea of giving an opportunity to an underrepresented group to kind of step into a different avenue that they normally are not in. I think my only feedback, which I don't know if I really detailed it a lot, but I would have liked to see, I think, a little bit more information about like the intersectional identities of some of the people involved, just to kind of give a I think a richer understanding of who the players are who are going to participate in this activity. And so a little bit more information about the leaders and sort of where they come from, besides the fact that they are of an Indian origin, would have been really nice. Speaking as someone of Indian origin who lives in the Austin community, I would say that I am really wanting to and hoping to see more complex representation of the people in our community. So multiple identities and things like that. So I think that's my only negative feedback. Otherwise, I think it's a really neat project.
Thank you both. Other comments from other reviewers? Yes, Hayato.
Yeah, I'm mostly going to echo it. I think it was very strong, and the cultural activities and the leadership are all strong and reflected in the application. My only notes, I guess, would be in the accessibility. While there are some accessibility accommodations included into the project, it didn't seem like enough to meaningfully expand the access to the event. And so I think if there were ways outside of, in the grant, it tells us, something being ADA accessible is not, like, the federal ADA accessibility is not the bar set here. So I think I wish I could have seen more ways to reach out and bring in people who might otherwise not get to enjoy this show. That's my only small note.
Thank you for that feedback. Other reviewers, anything to share?
I thought that accessibility was actually very well addressed in talking about accommodating women from different ranges of abilities with a wheelchair accessible venue, which I know is not necessarily everything that we're looking for, but they also mention supporting different learning styles. So that accessibility spoke to me as meeting the needs. So I differed in my colleague on that. The other piece that I differed on was intersectionality. Or I just want to, maybe I didn't differ, but I wanted to point it out. I don't know that it's been mentioned, just because it talks about the South Asian population, which of course is a underserved community and one that we're focused on and important. But it talked about women and South Asian and didn't mention other communities. So that's why I might have given it a lower score for that piece in particular. Otherwise, a very strong application.
Thank you. Any other comments that folks want to make sure are part of this conversation?
If there are no further comments or anything that has been or not already been said that you would like to add in, if not, then please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Aaron, Hayato, Liz, Shannon, and Anita. All right. All right, and that is our final application until lunch. We're about 30 minutes ahead of schedule, so we'll take an hour-and-a-half break again, because we do have on our website listed morning and afternoon sessions. So we will resume at 1 p.m. Central Time, and we will stop the recording. And we are back from lunch on the Elevate review panel for individuals and creative businesses, day 1. My name is Jesus Pantel. I'm the cultural funding supervisor. We have Jen Margulies here as our outside equity facilitator. All of the review panelists here have scored the applications, tentatively scored them, and provided comments prior to today's meeting. They will be going over their applications today. They can change their scores, but are not required to based on the feedback from their fellow panelists. We are not scoring on consensus, so panelists may have different takes, and that is fine if that is the case. We have 10-minute maximum amount of time allocated for each application. I will get my timer started while I'm speaking. If we have any kind of technical difficulties, we will stop both the recording and the timer while that is being sorted out. We're probably averaging around 4 to 5 minutes per application today. I think our longest has been about 8 minutes. But if we do have go to that 10-minute max, I'll give a 2-minute warning for all of the panelists, 1 minute to 30 seconds. Trying to see if there's anything else that the public should know. We asked the panelists to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent possible. We've asked them to provide constructive criticism and feedback for future improvement. It may be a bit quiet when we ask for additional comments, as we have asked the panelists not to repeat something that has already been stated. But if we notice that maybe, at least in their preliminary scores, there's divergent scores, we may call on the panelists at that time to add anything that hasn't been said by any of the other panelists. Jen, anything you would like to add for either the panelists or the public to be aware?
Thanks, Jesus. Just briefly, for folks who are watching this, that I am here in the role of an external equity facilitator because the focus of this grant program is on redressing historical inequities in funding through the city of Austin. And so I'll be here just to remind panelists, if necessary, city staff, what it is that we're focusing on and trying to uplift. So you'll hear me come on throughout the day to do that and to make sure that we're hearing all the voices of the panelists that we have gathered together to do this work.
Great, thank you, Jen. I mentioned earlier, we have a 10 minutes maximum review for each application. The timing will not start until the primary starts giving their comments. And so with that being said, we'll move on to our next application as we come back from our lunch break. So next application up for review is Almost Real Things. Hayato and Liz are our primary and secondary. And Hayato, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. So the project Almost Real Things, the overview of it is that they are a group trying to include the blind and visually impaired into the art community. This specific project is to have a mentorship program partnered with the TSBVI, the School for Blind and Visually Impaired. And then that mentorship program culminates into a exhibit. So the way I understand the project is that it is always serving a marginalized community, but even within that community, the group has done the work to make sure that they are affecting as much as they can a community of color and trying to uplift constituencies even within marginalized groups to make sure they are reaching further and empowering groups that need it. I think the application was very strong. I think it answered all the points in that were questioned. It answered all the sections in a fairly easy way to judge. I really don't have any comments about it. It has a lot of intersectionality and I feel like very powerful work proposed in the application.
Thank you. Secondary, Liz.
I agree wholeheartedly. I really enjoyed this this proposal. It was very well thought out, very intentional. I love the drill down into the smaller communities within an already marginalized community. That was very impactful for me, as well as the many accessibility opportunities that were available in this and the mentor. I mean, just the concept was very creative, and I can see a clear tie-in between the impact externally as well as the impact internally. And so that was really important to me, as well as the stakeholders were very important, and I love learning more about them and their work. So I don't have any feedback really, but I really did enjoy reading this proposal.
Right, thank you both. Any other comments that other reviewers would like to have in this space, either for the applicant or for your fellow reviewers to hear? I can see from the preliminary scoring that we did not have a lot of divergent opinions on this one. So people, we have asked folks not to repeat, as Jesus mentioned in the intro, if you have the exact same feedback, just in the interest of time. So if you're listening in and you hear that silence, don't be concerned. It just means that people are in agreement and trying to respect the time and not be repetitive. But with that said, if there are other things that people want to make sure come out in this discussion, this is a great time to unmute and jump in. Okay.
Seeing as there are no other comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Shannon, Liz, Hayato, Aaron, and Anita. Okay. Thank you. Next application up for review is Friday Night 1998 video by Rocker John Studios. Shannon and Hayato are our primary and secondary. And Shannon, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, I really appreciated this application. He is a Latino game developer, developing games for Latinos, which is definitely one of our core focus areas on the Latino culture. I gave this review or this application about a mid-high, low-high scoring due to the lack of kind of concrete information about the event. It's very vague. It's a great idea to want to reach out to some of these gamer events that he's gone to before, but doesn't really have it fully formed, is how I read it. It's more aspirational to collaborate with those events. The intersectionality seems very important. He wants to make it more accessible with the funds that he may receive. Language is obviously important since he's focused on Latino. The marketing efforts were a little vague as well, only mentions the social media marketing platforms, I believe. I'd have to check my work on that, but that's what I wrote down in my notes. But all in all, I appreciate the aspirational points of I think his heart is in the right place and he wants to do well by Latinos and Latino game makers, game developers. Doesn't have a huge history of supporting his community, elevating Latinos in the past, or at least it's not mentioned in the application. So that was another piece that I wanted to point out.
Thank you. Secondary, Hayato.
Yeah, I think I came with a similar takeaway. I want to highlight a thing in the accessibility that the programmer has had the forethought to consider what accessibility modifications can be made to video games, including people with mobility issues, something that's largely forgotten when it comes to video games. So I thought that was a really cool thing that should be noted. There's actually a question I had about the budget that they did include part of the budget to be an upgrade for computers, which my understanding is that not supposed to happen in the budget. But that also wasn't part of the scoring criteria, but that was something that I wanted to note that would have to be revised once or if this grant is approved. But outside of that, mostly echoing similar comments. I think there's a lot of value in this project culturally as a narrative and a time capsule of being in, from a marginalized community and being from underrepresented neighborhoods and having that kind of established as a piece of media art history as a video game. But like Shannon says, it's kind of hard to see, it's not quite developed enough to see how far this impact would reach or how the developer is trying to serve the community by making this video game.
Thank you. And then just very quickly, a comment on the budget comment. So the budget should be reflective of the application. But as Hayato mentioned, if the application does score high enough to receive funding and there are items that are not eligible in the budget or in any other section of the application for that matter, staff will work with the applicant prior to entering into the grant agreement to make sure that everything is eligible and legitimate. But with that being said, it's still, valuable commentary on, again, we're asking the panelists to provide constructive criticism and feedback for future improvement in how the application addresses the review criteria. So with that being said, comments from other panelists?
I just want to point out one thing just to kind of flesh out the point that was made that we're not sure how this applicant would lift up the marginalized community in which they come from. One part of the application gave me a little bit of pause, which was the suggestion that it's in the 1990s setting, and therefore has 1990s sensibilities to show sort of how far we've come. And that to me, if you're not a part of the community in which they're hoping to serve and you're playing the video game, could be a little bit troubling. So I wonder what the value is in doing this in a 1990 setting rather than now. So if we're talking about like maybe not a lot of representation of LGBTQT or something like that in the video game, it's just a point that I think that's really important to highlight, that is a little bit problematic in the application, I personally feel.
Thanks for sharing that. Other folks, any comments that you want to make sure get into this conversation? Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, panelists. As you're deciding if there are other comments that you would like to make, in the about the comment about the 90s, it does say further in the application, I've consulted with many prominent people to make sure that any character is accurate and presented honestly while not relying on lazy stereotypes or overly simplistic caricatures. I think the comment still stands and, could potentially be a way to strengthen future applications, talking about things like that. But just wanted to point out that part that was included in the application as well as you are considering your scores. Any other comments that have not, anybody have different opinions than something that has already been stated?
Well, I wouldn't say different. I would say it was a very creative idea. I love the demo video that was included. I think that helped to really clarify some things for me that maybe wasn't included in the written portion. But I think just figuring out how to flesh out the why and the who is gonna is what would tip it for me. Other than that, it's a very interesting idea.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores, let me know when you've done so. Shannon, Hayato, Liz, Aaron, Anita. All right. Okay, next application up for review is Film Kids. Aaron and Shannon are our primary and secondary. And Aaron, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yeah, thank you very much. I struggled with this application as an application, not necessarily as a group. So Film Kids is a school program, well, not put on by the school. It's a program who hosts clubs at middle school and elementary schools with the thought of creating film as a creative, emotional lifestyle outlet. I struggled in identifying the answers to the various application questions. Constituency was not well outlined. I understand that parents are some of the decision makers in this club, but there wasn't a great outline of the other leaders who are the adults in the room who are going to be contributing to this effort. So overall, I struggled with this application.
I agree with Aaron. I did struggle as well with the identification of the core audience constituencies that we're focused on. They mentioned economically disadvantaged community and constituents that have little or no opportunity to participate and collaborate art forms, which is a little vague, in my opinion. Accessibility is very important. Gender representation was mentioned in their letter of support, so I thought that was important to note. But it was just a little non-specific, as Aaron mentioned. Great program, though, as a film lover.
Thank you both. Anything else to note from other reviewers?
I just want to say a little bit. I think I mostly agree with how this is a project that serves broadly, but hard to see instances of specific community empowerment. I did want to commend them on having a fair amount of accessibility built into their program. In the way that it is developed into the program, it's clear that they are trying to expand accessibility as they develop and as they run the program, not just they have the program, okay, what's like a quick, easy way to get more people to be able to see it. So I appreciate the efforts built in for accessibility and language accessibility for this grant.
Thank you. Other comments, things that you'd like to bring into the conversation? I'll mention the same thing that I mentioned this morning, which is people are often at this point looking at their screens to make sure that they are remembering all of the comments that they've made in their notes. So we know that you all are still with us.
Thank you for that, Jen, especially for the applicants that are watching live now or maybe watching the recording later. Any further comments that have not already been captured by the panel? There are no divergent opinions or other comments to be made. If you will please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Shannon, Anita, Hayato, Aaron, and Liz. All right. Next application up for review is Texas Comedy's theatrical production. Anita and Aaron are our primary and secondary. And Anita, whenever you're ready to begin.
I really enjoyed reading this application. I thought it was a really unique idea and perspective and point of view. And one of the reasons why it was so enjoyable is, there was a lot of information about the key constituencies, the background of the folks who are planning to put up this musical theater performance, and their point of view was pretty clear. And so, absolutely, like their history of programming has been really interesting, kind of talking, uncovering, moments in history through musical theater. And the history involves underrepresented groups with participants who are from underrepresented groups. And they have free shows for veterans, which I thought was really, great. And their goal is to bring appreciation of local culture and history to our community. So there's an educational component. So I rated this application pretty highly. I didn't have too many issues with it.
Thank you. Secondary, Aaron?
The same from me. Outstanding application. I don't really have anything to add.
Thank you. And I can see that preliminary scores tend to be pretty much in the same range. But if folks do have anything in particular that you wanted to mention, whether it diverges or you just thought it was worthy of special note or feedback for the applicants, things you want your fellow reviewers to hear, this would be a great time to do that.
This is, I guess, more of a personal note. I am a current active duty spouse, and so this was really cool to see that this was a program that is being offered. I wish I was in Austin so that my kids and I could take part in it. But I would love more information maybe in future applications on how maybe those individuals that may not be in the local area could also take part or support the initiative. That's a little selfish dig.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you for that, Liz. And for the applicant and those watching in attendance, you may or may not be aware, but our panelists come from all over the United States, not just from Austin. Liz is from Texas, but from outside of Austin. And so, and just for the panelists to be, and I know, Liz, you're just giving a little bit because you were interested, but our guidelines state that any activities that we fund, because we are the local government here in Austin, that they have to take place within Austin or the extraterritorial jurisdiction. But with that being said, if you are touring or if you're doing things outside of Austin, if you have room, you can include that in your application. But that should, and it doesn't sound like it will be, but just so we're all clear, that should not be held against the applicant in considering the scoring, since that is not one of the scoring criteria. And I know you're not saying that, but I'm just saying that to be clear for everybody involved in this application. Further comments from the panel? If there are no other comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Anita and Hayato, Shannon, Liz, and Aaron. All right. Next application up for review is Always Play Studios. Liz and Anita are our primary and secondary. And Liz, whenever you're ready to begin.
Give me just a minute. I'm pulling it up.
Sure, and the timer will not start until Liz starts giving her comments.
Yeah. All right, so for this particular one, I scored in the mid-high range. I did enjoy the grant proposal. However, I do think that there could be a little bit more clarity around the actual event. Like for example, it says how you create spaces, healing spaces for the attendees. I think a little bit more clarity around that would be helpful. I appreciate the context from previous events and previous involvement from your constituents. However, I think just a little bit more clarity on like what exactly to expect would be helpful. But other than that, I think I scored it mid to high. So that's my only feedback.
Thank you, Liz. Secondary, Anita?
I'm pretty much exactly in line with Liz, actually. I was mid-high on this. I did make some notes about language access and marketing, that it wasn't exactly clear how they were going to incorporate other languages in the flyer, social media promotion, and to reach audiences who may not have English as their primary language. So I made a note of that. Otherwise, I thought it was a good application. Could have used maybe some specificity in that area.
Thank you both. I want to invite folks who have other perspectives to share what your perspectives are on your review.
I agree. I gave it a mid to high rating as well. I wanted to point out about accessibility because I don't believe that the answer really was sufficient for me to think that they had focused on accessibility. Seemed a little vague.
Thank you.
For this application, I think I saw it kind of as a it understands the problems that come up with having wellness spaces happen to also be white focusing spaces. So it acknowledges what is a problem. People of color have a hard time having wellness focus support. And so I do appreciate that it is supportive of people of color and in their mission. However, I was having a hard time getting from the application how they're actually going to reach, how they actually support I think there's, there's a conscientiousness to not be a white prioritizing space, but beyond consciousness, and there are a few venues that they also partnered with, but I just wish I could have seen more about how they would really empower the community to be able to embrace accepting these wellness events and promoting their own health by partaking.
Thank you. And we did speak this morning about the purpose of this grant funding, really being to elevate opportunities that are by, for, and about communities that are at risk of cultural displacement and cultural erasure, displacement and cultural erasure here in Austin, as well as communities that have been otherwise historically marginalized. So that by, for, and about piece is a lot of what reviewers will often look for specifics about. So thank you, Hayato, for bringing that up. Any other, I think not all of us have spoken, so if anyone else has anything else that came up in your review that you don't feel like has been present in this conversation and you want to lift it into conversation? Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone. If there are no further comments, please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Hayato, Shannon, Liz, Anita, and Aaron. All right. Next application up for review is June Bankston. Hayato and Liz are our primary and secondary, and Hayato, whenever you're ready to begin.
Oh, Hayato, you are still muted.
I was actually asking for 1 minute. Sorry.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Yeah, no, and that's fine. And again, the 10-minute maximum time to consider each application, but the timer will not start until the primary starts giving their comments.
Okay. So June Bankston is a young artist. She is proposing. This is one I kind of have to like keep coming back to review, but she's trying to promote I guess spaces that are kind of community dialogue, community themed spaces and events. And so what's the next page? Oh no, sorry, I keep losing her place. So the proposed activities, I think they have a good purpose for civic engagement. They have gone through the trouble of making sure their events are in spaces that target institutionally marginalized demographics. So I think they are doing the mission of empowering people as a community, and they are doing the work to make sure they are reaching those people as a community. I overall thought it was just a very strong application. There really was very little to critique. Even going through accessibility and language services, it is clear that the intention of this application was always to empower communities while also expanding access to these resources.
Great. Thank you. And before we go into thank you, Hayato. And before we go into the secondary, I just want to notice, looking at the application, it seems like the artist's preferred pronouns are he, they. So moving forward, we can use that. And I think for the secondary reviewer.
Liz?
So I also believe that this was a strong application. However, I did struggle with it a bit when I was scoring, because I was trying to find the balance between the art part of it and the voting part of it and how they kind of conjoin. There may be a personal barrier for me, but I did have a little challenge scoring this. However, I did score them about maybe mid to lower high. Overall, I appreciate the accessibility, access, the intentionality behind all of the work that has been done before. And so outside of I think, again, it was a barrier for me. I did have a little trouble combining the concept with the need or the explanation in the grant. So.
I think it is. Other perspectives, other reviewers?
I was not finding a very clear answer in regards to cultural leadership and where that leadership extended beyond the creator of the programming.
Thank you. Other folks?
I give it actually a really high score when reviewing the application, but now I want to look back and make sure that I'm not missing something that my colleagues saw. So
I want to echo what you said. I actually scored this very high. And I felt like the leadership part gave me context as to why this applicant wants to have these types of inclusive events and then include civic engagement. So for me, I felt like this applicant's lived experience matched what they are trying to do civically, which is to get people to get out and vote. So I scored this really high.
I'm going to agree with Anita on that. Sorry to overtalk.
Thank you, Anita. And yeah, Shannon, if there are things, you know, as Jesus has said, the charge is not for you all to come to consensus, you know, in your scoring, and people come from different life experiences and professional experiences and read things differently for lots of reasons. That's why we have this conversation. So if there's anything that you would want to add, you know, Shannon, about why you scored it high, then that is also something that your reviewers, you know, fellow reviewers can benefit from, you know, just as you've benefited from, you know, some of the critiques that folks offered.
I thought it was a very thorough, well thought out application that addressed all of the questions in a very informative way. That's why I graded it so high.
Thank you. Anything else that folks want to make sure is a part of this conversation before we move on? Jesus, I think we still have time, yes, on this.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah, we still have almost 5 minutes, so
Great.
still time if panelists have additional comments they would like to offer. I will say staff has reviewed these just very preliminarily, just for eligibility. I am kind of bringing up the applications as we're going through them. So I have not read them in depth, but just with the voting and the arts, at least from what I see, very quickly glancing at the application, they do talk about the artistic aspects that will be part of the activity. But again, the review panelists are reviewing these in more detail. And so again, we're asking them to provide constructive criticism, feedback for future improvement, both what they liked about the application and what they would have liked to have seen. So with that being said, any additional comments from the panel? If there are no further comments, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Oh, Shannon, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. You're saying that you're done. Okay, Shannon, Hayato. Aaron, Anita, and Liz. Okay. All righty, great. Next application up for review is Body Intelligence Academy. Shannon and Hayato are our primary and secondary. And Shannon, whenever you're ready to begin.
So Body Intelligence Academy, this brought me so much joy, honestly, reading this application. I give it a high mid score. They are focused on mental and physical health for women and wellness for women. They have some great events planned, a movement playground, a quarterly event in class for that, a twerk and shine, which sounds like fun and I want to go. They asked for feedback from their constituency, which I think is important, and they plan to partner with other Black and Brown creatives, nonprofits, and groups. So they're getting a lot of input. The applicant had some important lived experiences. I think my only, they have an ASL interpreter they're intending to have an ASL interpreter, but it wasn't really said how that would be incorporated, just that they would have one during the event. So, and no language mentioned, since they claimed it was dancing, so no language was needed. But I do think that that's still important to have some sort of, it's part of the application that you focus on language. So those are my takeaways.
Thank you. Secondary, Hayato?
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty much agreeing with Shannon. I think it was really cool seeing the event itself is geared in a way that it's clear that it's addressing what is needed and in a way to reach those constituencies. You know, not comparing between applications, of course, but this is a you know, body wellness activity that focuses on people of color, understanding that they don't have the same type of spaces and built for them. So really cool. The leadership behind it sounds like they are rooted and wanting to work for and beholden to their communities. And same as Shannon said, there were some points that would have to be docked for language. Even if there's dance, you know, the assumption that we don't need to add accessibility is, you know, not addressing accessibility. So with the ADA one, it was addressed that they, you know, will have a sign language interpreter. However, I just see that as one for the quarterly events when, you know, the events are supposed to be monthly and other things going on. 4 out of 16 or more seemed like it was some, but not a lot of accessibility expansion. So I gave a medium score for that. But otherwise, the content and the key constituencies, I think, make this a very strong application.
Thank you. Shannon, I noticed that you're off mute. Are there things that you wanted to add?
Sorry, no, I should have been back on mute.
No worries. Anyone else? Things that you wanted to comment on about the proposal, your perspectives on it, highlights or constructive criticism you had to offer? And again, we don't expect consensus. So if you have a different perspective than what's been spoken, that's valuable for your colleagues to hear as well.
If there are no further comments from the panel, no differing opinions or anything that has not been stated that you would like to state or make sure it gets covered. If there is none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Aaron, Hayato, Liz, Shannon, and Anita. All right. And I think we are scheduled for a break. On our website, we do kind of list the tentative schedule, understanding that we may run ahead or behind schedule. I think we're about 30 or maybe even 40 minutes ahead of schedule. Let's take a 20-minute break. It is 1:40. So we will come back at 2:00 p.m. It says 1:41. We'll make it a 19-minute. Let's just keep it simple. We'll come back at 2:00 Central Time. You can turn your cameras off, but please turn. All right, we are back from break, continuing the Elevate Review Panel for Individuals and Creative Businesses, Day 1. Our next application up for review is One Voice Ensemble. Aaron and Shannon are our primary and secondary. And Aaron, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yeah, thank you. This is in regards to One Voice Ensemble. This artist is seeking to work with fellow artists to create a concert that they can package together and then rehost across a variety of different locations. I struggled with this application. It read more like a person with an idea and not a person with a concrete idea or a concrete plan. So the marketing was lacking, the accessibility, whether it be language or physical, was lacking. So overall, I did not score this application well.
Thank
I
you.
gave-
Secondary?
Yeah, I gave it a middle score, probably based on the same things that Aaron mentioned. It didn't have a lot of focus on the event. I did think that several of the other pieces were addressed, the budget, the intersectionality, those pieces. I did want to point out that the marketing only mentioned hiring, an external advertising, somebody to help them, and didn't really go into details about what that external marketing person would be doing for them. So it just, the answers to a lot of the questions were pretty vague and not well thought out. But I did still give it, because of all the other pieces, a fairly mid-range score. It's just not, it didn't seem like their ideas were focused on the communities that we're focused on for these grants.
Thank you both. Other comments from other reviewers? We did have a range of scoring, and want to remind folks that we don't have to come to consensus. That's not the charge of any of the reviewers in the panel. And anytime people have differing perspectives, we invite you to bring it up in the review panel, both so that the applicants can hear it and so that your colleagues on the review panel can benefit.
I think I'm pretty much echoing Shannon here, but the project, well, includes many people of color as artists and as performers. It was hard to find the thread to see where their work was to try to specifically reach communities or empower them for the key constituencies.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any constructive criticism for the applicant? Any other perspectives that you'd want to share with your reviewers?
If there are no further comments or differing perspectives on this application, if there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Anita, Shannon, Liz, Hayato, and Aaron. All right. Next application up for review is Red Light Lit Austin. Anita and Aaron are our primary and secondary. And Anita, whenever you're ready to begin. And while Anita's pulling that materials up, yeah, the timer won't start until Anita starts giving her feedback.
Okay, so Red Lit Austin, like some of the other applications, I felt very joyful reading this. I felt like it was really a neat project, and I think that Red Light Lit has a really solid history of serving underrepresented, underserved demographics. I particularly enjoyed it because, I am an editor of a literature magazine, and, this mission that they have of, bringing to light voices that are not often heard was really powerful. And so there was not a whole lot that I didn't enjoy about this application. One point to note that, their accessibility I thought was really well thought out, both language and for people with physical challenges. And so that felt like a little bit more robust of an area compared to some of the other applications that I've read. So I was really happy to hear, or to read that, they would have an ASL interpreter at all their poetry events and workshops. They have a designated accessibility services coordinator to be present. And so in addition to the work that they're doing, the accessibility piece I thought was very thoughtful. So I gave them a very high score.
Thank you, Anita. Secondary, Aaron?
I as well scored this application well. Great history, great understanding of constituency, excellent job outlining that in the application. I did have a comment on the cultural activities section. I just made a statement. It was difficult to ascertain how the constituencies themselves are involved in the various various creative activities. But other than just some minor comments, I thought this was a great application.
Great, thank you both, and thank you for the specificity. Describing what works well in the application in meeting the questions is really helpful for applicants. And I do want to mention, especially for folks who might be watching this portion of the panel and have not watched previously, that reviewers aren't in their scoring applicants against one another or in comparison to one another. So as you could tell from the detail in Anita's response right now, that applicants are being scored as far as how their application really is matching up with the review criteria. That said, what other observations or comments would other reviewers like to bring into this conversation?
I want to say a little bit on this one. I agree a lot with the foundation, like the organization itself is doing a lot of great work. I had a little bit of trouble when it came to the key constituencies and the way they describe their programming to benefit them, in that it was hard to get a lot more information past the specific months for specific groups. And I'm gonna say personally, from my lived experiences, sometimes those start to feel a little bit pandering. So I always look at like what's outside of that to reach that audience. Or I wish there could have been a little bit of like statistics on how many people of color are actually involved in the creative side or featured, as opposed to kind of the general terms of saying we aim to include, we aim to strengthen bonds. Like it would have been nice to see a little bit more data just to see some of the measure of the impact.
Thank you so much for that. Any other comments from other panelists? Yeah, please, Anita.
I just want to also highlight one other thing besides the accessibility. One thing that I thought was interesting, which I don't know if we specifically outlined in the mission of the grant, but the revenue sharing and kind of fair pay for the artists within the organization is something that I'd like to highlight.
Thank you. Any other comments, things that stuck out to you, either to offer constructive criticism on or that you think is important to bring up? All right, thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Finally was able to unmute myself there. If there are no final comments, just making sure people aren't having problems with their mute buttons like I was. Anita, yes. Oh, no, you're raising your hand to say you're done. Okay, Anita, Hayato, Shannon, Liz, and Aaron. All right, and that application is completed. We'll move on to the next application, which is Mothers Express. Liz and Anita are our primary and secondary. And Liz, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. So Mothers Express was a very interesting concept. It looked as if the key constituents was just the artists themselves, which could be a positive or negative. With this particular grant, I did appreciate the information, the potential reach of the proposal. My two concerns fell within the accessibility, both in the language and the disability accessibility portion. There was a part where it was said that you would survey those to see what would be needed. And so I wasn't sure how to really weigh that because it feels as if it hasn't been completely thought out independently before bringing it to the audience that you're serving. So kind of learning more about who you're serving and what their needs potentially might be would be helpful. And also with the language, also with this is strictly based on the guidelines, like trained professional. I'm not sure if either or both are specifically trained professionals outside of being native speakers. So those are my only two comments for this particular proposal.
Thank you. Secondary, Anita?
I rated this application pretty highly. I agree with you, Liz, in that we needed a little bit more specificity in certain areas. Definitely this applicant has had to have a lot of partners and collaborators. I totally understand that, but I wish that they were named specifically. What I really valued about the application is the point of view is different. The whole idea of marginalized mothers from marginalized communities and telling their stories. My sense was that she would recruit artists to participate at Big Medium to be in the, to be a part of this exhibition. She did say people with accessibility challenges, BIPOC, LGBTQ plus mothers would be represented. So I want to assume that she would be very mindful and thoughtful about accessibility, but I agree with your point that it's not really fleshed out. But overall, I felt like it was a strong application. For this application, I also want to highlight the letters of recommendation were quite good.
Thank you very much, both of you. Other reviewers, anything you'd like to bring into the space about what you saw in this application or would have liked to see more of? And while y'all are looking at your other screens to see your comments, I do want to ask Jesus, can you speak a little bit about the language in the application about trained professionals and what the intention is behind that from the city's perspective?
Sure. With trained professionals, specifically when it comes to language access, but with other accessibility with physical or, visible and invisible disabilities, we're looking to see that, someone may be somewhat knowledgeable about, so they can speak the language, they're familiar or, comfortable around people with disabilities, they're a caretaker for someone. But we are looking, for the highest points possible to look for a trained professional. They may have certifications or something that they go through annually. There may be, just updates that they get that even if they are a native speaker, maybe, for language access, there could be, different dialects or different types of words that are using. So it's okay to have, something like that. But for the highest points, that's where we're looking for a trained professional. And so detailing that out, describing that in the application is what will help the applicant get the most points. Because the panel can only score based on what is either in the application or what they can find, maybe on your website or social media if they are looking at that.
Thank you so much for explaining that piece of how the trained professionals fits into the accessibility questions. Thank you. Other reviewers who have things that they want to bring up from your review, from your perspective? Okay.
Any further comments differing from either a different take or something that hasn't been stated already that you would like to state? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Erin, Shannon, Hatho, Liz, and Anita. All right. Next application up for review is Chinwe Okori. Hayato and Liz are our primary and secondary, and Hayato, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. I scored this application relatively high. I saw that it is basically a person of color who is creating art inspired by their own life and experiences, and the events kind of promote the movie that she's making, as well as include the local community to get involved with essentially, I don't know how to the sensitive way to say this, but working with people, older people who may have memory loss. They're working with those kinds of groups to work nonprofits like Wonders and Worries. Yeah, so it's a lot of intersectionality between disabilities and community of color being served in the narratives. The history of service also always shows that their works reflect their experience as an artist within these communities. So for those reasons, I scored it pretty high as a work done by and for the community, with specific efforts to reach people who would not otherwise be able to enjoy the art, the movie.
Thank you. Secondary, Liz?
I actually agree. I did score this one relatively high. I did appreciate including the partnership with Wonders and Worries in the proposal, as well as the reach that this could potentially have. I don't want to duplicate what Hayato said, but I agree. I scored this very high, and I appreciated the submission.
All right. Thank you both. Other reviewers, things to add from your perspective? Anything you haven't already heard mentioned that you would want to make sure your fellow reviewers are hearing? Any feedback you have for the applicant?
I also scored this very high. The only thing I noted was that the event itself, the cultural activity that they're asking to fund, doesn't, maybe I'm missing it, but doesn't really say exactly where it's focused on the key constituencies. It says key constituencies, but doesn't give more information than that, and that they're partnering with Wonders and Worries. And maybe Wonders and Worries is focused on that, and I'm just missing it. It says Wonders and Worries is an organization that serves wide ranges of families. Yeah, I guess I just missed it. So that's my piece, is that the cultural activity doesn't focus on our specific, or doesn't mention focusing on our specific constituencies. Wow, I can't talk, sorry.
Thank you for that, Shannon. Looking at their application, and again, for those who weren't here earlier, staff has done a preliminary, tentative review of these with applications, but has not done a deep dive like the review panelists have. In their proposed activities, they do say key constituencies, including families served by Wonders and Worries, are directly involved in the development and execution of this activity. Their input and feedback will shape the event to ensure it meets their needs and meaningful support. And then they talk about what their production team will do. So there is some information there. I think the panelists, Shannon's comment still stands about, more specificity might help make for a stronger response and allow the panel to score, that particular panelist to score higher in this question. But just to let you know, and again, panelists looked at probably about 25 or so applications. They're not comparing one against the other. They're just scoring how each particular application addresses the review criteria. But since they are looking at so many, just a little bit of a reminder that that's what it did say for that in that particular response to that question. Anita, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I also, like all the reviewers, was a little bit confused about exactly like who they're serving is and whether they're just producing an event and taking the participants from Wonder and Worries. And so I went on their website, the nonprofit Wonder and Worries, and noticed that their leadership is actually, they don't have a lot of BIPOC leadership whatsoever. And so I went back to the application. It looks like they're sort of trying to fill in the gaps. And so it's, written that they'll ensure participants come from a diverse racial, socioeconomic, and cultural backgrounds, including overlapping identities. So my sense when I read it is that they are partnering with Wonder and Worries, but there probably is a gap in who they're serving. And so this applicant will help fill in the gap. That is what I construed from their application. Agreed that it could be a little bit more transparent and have a little bit more information, but.
Thank you. Anyone else on this point, or anything else that you saw in the application that you'd like to have be part of this conversation?
If there are no additional comments or divergent viewpoints or thoughts, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Hayato, Shannon, Liz, Anita, and Aaron. All right. Next application up for review is Jesse Wilson Presents Lines, Palette Artwork Exhibition. Shannon and Hayato are our primary and secondary. And Shannon, whenever you're ready to begin.
This is a great application. I scored it relatively high. I appreciated the detailed answers, definitely focused on BIPOC, women. Is that what I wrote? Can't read my writing. Women, age, and disability for their event, specifically Lines is what their event is called. Symbolic representation of, gosh, I'm so sorry, I can't read my writing. Very immersive art experience, conversation about ageism, sexism, womanhood, racism, and queerness. So intersectionality is definitely a key point for them. They have passion to gather unrepresented people in the creative community. They had examples of supporting key constituencies in their work. They intend to collaborate with the School for the Blind and Visually Impaired with Braille. Their language translations are addressed. And yeah, I just felt like it was a very well thought out application. Thank you.
Thank you. Secondary, Hayato.
Hi. I have very little to differentiate. I echo Shannon a lot. I think the artist is coming from a community, reflects the community they serve. Definitely appreciate the accessibility built into the project to reach out with the Texas School for Blind and Visually Impaired. It shows a lot of effort on this project, not just to share their own art and call that community outreach, but actually pull the community in and empower them to see these and have them leaving feeling more than they just went to an event. So I scored it pretty high.
All right, thank you both. I see that on this one, our preliminary scores for the panelists are fairly divergent. So it would be wonderful to hear from folks who maybe had other perspectives to share about this application and how you scored it, what you saw. And again, for folks who are joining this webinar or video a little late, everyone has their comments on the screen. So when you see the reviewers looking very determinedly away from us, that is because they are studying their comments to make sure that they can participate in the conversation robustly.
And while they're looking at their comments to see if they do have anything to add, again, we are not scoring on consensus. So if a panelist does have a different take than another panelist or other panelists, that's fine. We want to hear that, so that way the applicant can know, you know, what the panel as a whole thought of their application. And with that being said, you know, panelists can also change their scores depending on the feedback they receive from their fellow panelists. Their preliminary scores, you're not required to change them, but you can change them depending on the feedback that you hear from your fellow panelists.
Yeah,
I
Liz.
think for me, one of the things that I kind of struggle with, it was a very strong proposal, but the cultural leadership, it kind of spoke to a previous application that I've scored in reference to other ones that we've reviewed, where there was a line about how the project often inspires you to work with other people. I think kind of knowing who those people were or very helpful to kind of give more clarity on who's also working on this project with you, and their intersectionality and buy-in into the project as a whole, outside of just the applicant's perspective.
Thank you, Liz. And just for the applicant and those watching the recording, panelists are not comparing one application against another when they're scoring. The comment was just made for the fellow panelists to kind of see how their thinking is on that one. But we do ask the panelists to score each application individually based on how it answers the review criteria, not in comparison to other applications. With that being said, other comments, divergent viewpoints on this application? If there are no further comments, and seeing as there appears to be none, panelists, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Hayato, Shannon, Aaron, Liz, and Anita. All right. And we are on to our last application for the day, Strange Wisdom ENT. I'm assuming that stands for entertainment. Strange Wisdom ENT, Multimedia Community Activities. Aaron and Shannon are our primary and secondary. And Aaron, whenever you are ready to begin.
Yeah, thank you. What an interesting application to end on, considering most of my comments for this application are how big they've gone. And I could have liked to have seen a little more drill down. So this group provides, let me see, I had a sentence I could pull out easily. They help with the production of new creativity that's been generally well appreciated by me, generally created around SAMHSA, which if you're not familiar is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to best reach those at risk of a variety of different things. So when I talk about very big, but drill down into the small, this group could have benefited from a deeper description of their constituencies. As well, they could have had a more clear understanding of their calendars surrounding the creation of the org. So although they have a great history, I think there was some missing information in regards to how long they've been around and what they've been doing for what periods of time. When it came to their cultural activities, when I was making the comment of these people go big and then there's the need to drill down, when it came to the cultural activities, I wrote this section could have benefited from a larger umbrella description of how each of the activities contributes to the larger goal. as well. It's not well outlined how constituencies are contributing to the development of the outlined events. So there was a lot going on in this application, and I appreciate, it seems like they have a nice plan for what they'd like to accomplish with specific events and what goes into those events. I rated this, medium range, but overall it was interesting to learn about this group.
Thank you. Secondary, Shannon?
I agree with Aaron. This was a great application, lofty goals. The event information was very detailed. Would have liked to have seen a little more information about the audiences that they intend to reach with that activity, but still a great idea that they have. The accessibility was a little vague in my notes. They mentioned it in the budget though, so that was good. Language was also mentioned in the budget, but still a little vague. Language accessibility. The marketing efforts aren't really documented. My notes on that specifically were, it's unclear how SWE plans to market the event, but they recognize that it's important to do so. It's also mentioned in the budget, but I believe their answer is just a little broad and not specific as to answer the question as we need to hit the marks. But a good application nonetheless.
Thank you both for opening us up. It looks like the preliminary scores for this were all over the map. So that leads me to really lean into inviting you all to share with us what your thoughts were, how they might differ from what you've already heard. Yeah, Anita.
I was all over the map within my own scoring, actually. And so that makes sense. I also felt like the application started off extremely specific and very strong. And I was like, on board. I love the information about their point of view. Their executive leadership is, really outstanding, really diverse, creative leadership and advisors. But I felt that as that application went on and we were seeking more specificity, that's where things fell apart a little bit, around marketing, accessibility, names of partners. So not just, the folks who are in their leadership, but who are they partnering with? The subject areas, like, a program around grief, love it. But I needed some more information about exactly like how they would execute this and who's helping them do that, and how they really are going to bring constituents into a space where everyone feels like they're being served fully and authentically and fairly. And so I think that this is an incredible organization. I really like, their programming. I think they have a great point of view. My advice to them is to be more specific and really think about accessibility a little bit better.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your specificity. Other reviewers who haven't had a chance to offer your thoughts.
I think I'm pretty much going to echo Anita. I think there was a lot of really exciting things to see in the application, and then a lot of places where it kind of left me as a reviewer assuming like what was going to happen or how this reaches, and the more I have to assume, the less points I can like confidently give. I will say I gave this kind of an initial score once, and it was a little bit lower because there are a lot of parts that were left out that I just didn't feel comfortable saying like this definitely reaches the audience or this definitely empowers them. But going through some of the documents, again, kind of gave me a little bit clearer idea of who is involved and gave me a better idea of what the project looks like. So, reviewing my review, looking at the work samples, I did raise my score a little bit on that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Comments from other panelists? Anything that has not yet been stated that you had a note of or want to make sure that either the applicant or your fellow panelists are aware of? All right, if there are no further comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Shannon, Aaron, Anita, Hayato, and Liz. All right.
I actually accidentally closed out, but I'm gonna go back in and finalize it.
Okay, and the lights just went out when I did that, so that's what that clapping was. But we are completed with this application, and we are completed for the day. So we will stop the recording.